Let's now then look at stories that are making headlines in the media. We begin with The Guardian, who lead with the resignation of Labour Deputy Leader Tom Watson. The paper says new questions will be asked about the direction of the party as one of its leading critics walks away. Meanwhile, the other newspapers are looking at the use of social media during the run-up to the UK general election. This is The Independent. It wonders whether votes could be swayed by the use of deepfake material in campaigns. The LA Times focuses on the rise of plant-based food companies as Impossible Foods works on creating a new plant-based pork. The company has set its sights on China, which it considers the crown jewel of the $2.7 trillion global meat market. As the flu season approaches, there could be good news for UK employers, according to The Times, as pulling a sickie appears to be becoming less popular amongst British workers. Latest figures show absence rates have more than halved in the past 2 decades. And finally, on BBC News Online, a pilot on a plane has accidentally set off a hijack alarm and sparked a major security alert at Schiphol Airport in the Dutch city of Amsterdam. Part of the airport, one of Europe's busiest, was then closed off as police responded to the reported threat. Fingers on the buzzers. Well, we have Alpesh Patel with us, as you're probably well aware, Chief Executive of Profinium Partners. And let's get stuck in. So The Guardian, and actually I have to say, nearly all the newspapers have Tom Watson on their front page this morning in the UK as he announced he's leaving. He's not running in this election.
No, he's not. And I ought to declare I led a campaign of 130 British Indian groups against Corbyn's Labour Party because we think they're damaging relations between the UK and India. So I ought to declare that first and foremost. And I think this is also bad news for the Labour Party because Tom Watson as deputy was seen as a moderate voice. If this pushes them more to the left, where presumably there are fewer voters, and a report today in one of the newspapers, the Metro, said they're going to lose by about 100 seats, which is a whopping disaster. This would move them presumably to an even greater defeat.
Not necessarily. And remember, we can't rely on the polls, as we've learnt in previous elections.
I'll give you that about the polls. But if you're moving more towards the left, and presumably there are fewer people in support of you, let alone, I've never seen the kind of campaigns we've been running ever before at an election. So I think there's a lot of enemies of the party. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the Conservatives would win. Look, I think the Lib Dems are coming up strong as well. The Greens, you know, talk about environment, the Greens might be a shock winner in many, many seats as well.
Interesting, though, that lots of the analysis about, you know, Tom Watson's departure, been in politics for over 30 years, and it was a very amicable conversation between him and Jeremy Corbyn as he did announce the fact that he's leaving, because, of course, he was a very close ally of former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, who was a part of Ed Miliband's team.
I say a moderate voice.
And there is the concern that without him there
were people at Labour Party conference, which seems to have got, and I watched it, seems to have got more extreme, who wanted to oust him. Remember, this was part of the controversy.
There were calls for him to go.
And maybe he's just got fed up, as so many MPs have resigned from all parties who've said, you know, we're just fed up of divisive politics. Now, he's not said that's the reason he's going, but given that there was an element of the left of the Labour Party who are trying to get rid of him, there is a danger that they've been so captured by narrow interest groups that they're going to be even less electable than the polls suggest.
I mean, he hasn't been very specific about why he's leaving. He said it's personal reasons, but he has been very clear in saying he will continue to support the Labour Party and continue to help them in their campaign to get into government.
I think a lot of the MPs leaving will continue doing public service, and I think that's a good thing. I think the more of us that do public service, the things that we believe in, is a good thing, because there's been a lot of talent from all parties which is lost, and a lot of people who've got a voice and can make social change, again, from all parties. That's all positive. I don't think this is positive for the Labour Party. And given the bad news that there was for the Conservatives yesterday, they'll probably be relieved that they're not on the front pages today.
No.
They'll definitely be having a sigh of relief, because, as I say, I don't think this is good for Labour at all.
Really interesting, though, analysis in The Independent on the part of Cuba Shan Baptiste, who's written this editorial piece about the use of social media in the run-up to this particular election in the UK. You know, this election could be won by deep fakes is the scary headline. What is she saying?
Well, essentially, it's about the pictures, the images, the tweets, which are false, and then they go viral, and all of a sudden you've got large enough people believing them to change their votes. Now, in one sense, this isn't new. I mean, any of us can create a tweet, but it's the ability to reach more people. And you'll have, I'm sure, got WhatsApps from it's usually my dad who sends me WhatsApp, believes anything on WhatsApp.
Is he watching?
No, he'll be asleep. But he'll send me, of course, politics to some extent has always been about lies. I mean, people. That's why we're as the members of the public, we're so
what do you
disinterested
think about this?
Because we think, oh well, you know, manifestos, aren't they lies? And politicians, they're known as not telling the truth, and this just adds to it. I'm afraid.
I mean, this article talks
It's
about
sad.
political spin doctors using, you know, shameless tactics to try and win votes or sway opinion, and through platforms such as Twitter and Facebook and other social media platforms. That's where they're really.
It's why it's even more important.
Focusing their attention.
No, but you and I know that journalists, whether it's BBC, Financial Times, Mirror, whatever, professional journalists will look at the sources. My dad won't. And now, because of the level of accessibility, it's not just deep fakes, it could be superficial fakes. Yes, that will sway. Now, in this one, given how much the polls are saying one side over the other, I don't think it's going to be the swaying factor. But in other issues, or in some seats, it may well be the false story, which says, for instance, around Brexit, people say, well, it was the false narratives about Turkey about to join the EU and an influx of Muslims. So there was enough people who are anti-Muslim who might have swung it. That's one aspect of the lie about Turkey joining the EU, which might have swung it at the last minute. That's a fake story, which played into prejudices, and that's what will swing it in some seats, I'm afraid.
Just to say, BBC Online, of course, has lots of analysis, but also lots of really helpful elements where, you know, the general election made simple. This today, election 2019, your questions answered. Where should students vote? So it focuses on the young in particular and the young vote today. But there's lots of analysis and lots of links that will help you when it comes to your questions answered about various elements to do with the election.
Hopefully viewers will become better at realising that actually, let's go to the sources. And look, I trust the BBC. I trust these newspapers here.
I think it's a question of questioning everything you see and read in terms of on social media in particular.
Yeah, we tend not to do that. People tend not to do that. To this day, you know, I'll look at my Facebook today and guaranteed there'll be a lot of stuff which I can find in 3 seconds was fake, but I know other people won't do it because it plays into their pre-existing prejudices. And those people, maybe they're not the swing voters because they're already going to do what they were going to do.
Now let's look at LA Times, which is looking at Impossible Foods, which is another one of these companies like Beyond Meat that's coming up with plant-based alternatives. It's creating pork now, plant-based pork, as a way into China, because in China there's huge demand for pork. It's a huge element of their diet. And actually in China they've had, because of things like swine flu and other problems, they've had big shortages this year, and it's been a real issue. What do you think of this plant-based pork?
Sally, again, I'm going to show my self-interest in this. I am a vegan, but
you've invested in Beyond Meat.
I've invested in Beyond Meat as well, so there's another interest as well. To our friends in China, for God's sake, whichever camera 5. If you want to save the environment, you want to save your health, stop eating not just pork, stop eating animals. Stop making, as Gandhi said, stop making your body a graveyard for the carcasses of dead animals. But actually, when it comes to... And the statistics support me, science supports me.
But when it comes to the plant-based foods or alternatives, there's some analysis say they are so heavily processed, and we're told to not eat processed food.
No, absolutely.
And actually, the salt levels in some cases
from the science
are
I've
5
seen,
times higher.
From the science I've seen, they're better than eating meat.
Organic meat.
They're better than eating meat for the environment, for your health, for your heart. And the American Heart Foundation study shows this. Virtually every single scientific report shows this. But if you want to be best of all, of course, don't eat processed food at all. But certainly getting off meat is the easiest way that we can all do something to help do our bit for saving the environment, as long as, of course, you believe in climate change and there's an environmental problem.
Let's look at the Times. Workers halve absence rates by cooling time on sick days. This is in the last couple of decades, and especially since the financial crisis.
Yeah.
Is that because we're less secure in our jobs? People can't get away with it anymore?
It might be that. We're no longer the sick man of Europe. We're no longer going to be a man of Europe or woman of Europe soon. But yeah, I think this
We're still in Europe.
We're still in Europe for now.
We just won't be in the European Union.
We won't be sick either. So people aren't calling in sick at the moment as much as they used to. I think that's good news, as long as it's not, and I'm sure the Labour movement would say this, as long as it's not because they're so fearful of their jobs that even when they're unwell to do those jobs, they're too scared to come in.
People
that is absolutely
coming in when they're unwell.
Because they're infecting everyone else. Whenever we get staff coming in the office who are sick, I tell them to go home because it makes me incredibly annoyed. But it is in one sense, yeah, there's got to be a balance. It is good that hopefully this will impact productivity, and it's good news in terms of people not fake calling in, and as opposed to, you know, sort of fake posts. Don't post on Facebook when you're suntanning yourself and you're ill. Some people have done that.
Wimbledon and you get caught on the telly.
It's been done.
See you soon, Alpesh. Thank you so much. And thank you too for your company. Have a lovely day.